Hello, Professor. My name is Matt. This is my brother Sean, and so we're gonna have a little conversation here about Benito Cereno, the book. So I'm just gonna tell him about, because he's never read it before. So I'm gonna give him a quick summary and explain some of the things that I picked up on, and we're just gonna talk about it, some of the symbols and questions that come out of the book. So pretty much, it was this captain I was telling you about. He sees a ship. It's breaking down, it's disheveled. So he's a generous guy. He goes to investigate, see if he can help them. The ship that's broken down, it's the San Dominic. So keep that in mind. Because I don't want to keep messing you up with the names. So it's San Dominic. The captain of the ship is Benito Cereno. So that's what the book is called. And this guy he's strange. He's so weird. He's suspicious. He's not your typical captain. You think a captain would be like a big, strong, muscly guy, or not even muscly, but just like a guy with a bigger charisma, someone who knows what they're talking about. This guy just seems like he's out of it. He's sick, he's weak, he's tired. The captain, Cereno, claims that his ship faced scurvy. Scurvy is like have you ever heard of scurvy? It's like a disease that a bunch of people on ships, when they go out to sea for a long time, they get this disease. And it just makes your body really weak. And then he also claimed that they faced a storm. And one thing that he noticed as well, the Captain Delano, is that there was a lot more black people on the ship than white people. So there's a lot more slaves than white men on the San Dominic. Cereno also has a lot of coughing fits, which adds to this sickness. Yeah. Also important to note is that he has a slave, a faithful slave, as mentioned in the book, whose name is Babo. So keep the name Babo in mind. Babo. Anyway, so while Delano's on the ship, he notices a bunch of things going on that's just weird. He sees, I have a few examples here. He sees slaves acting violently towards the other sailors, which back in the day, back in this time period,
would be reversed. Yeah,
ridiculous. That would not be acceptable. And he mentions this, and he thought that a lot of these acts warranted punishment, but Cereno, the weak captain, did nothing about it. So Delano was weirded out by that. Another thing is some sailors, which we'll get into later, but some sailors looked at this captain, the guy who went on the ship, Delano, with intent, as if they were trying to communicate something to him, with that weird look in their eyes, hey, I need to tell you something, but I can't tell you it for a reason. So that was something else that Delano mentioned in the book. And then this is what I wanted to talk about. So there was a knot. Literally a sailor's, I don't even know a sailor's knot. It was all tied up, and so one of the sailors tried to throw it to the Captain Delano, literally give it to him. But a slave literally, I didn't mention his name, but a slave comes in, intervenes, takes it, and throws it off the ship, which was weird, obviously suspicious. And then before all of this, there's a skeleton as the ship head, literally a dead person's body as the ship head. So that's obviously someone who got killed or died. Anyway, so Delano the captain finally starts questioning the ship, and he's what's going on here? This is weird. And he originally thinks that the captain, the weak captain Cereno, Benito Cereno, he thinks that he's plotting against him. He thinks that all of this is just a weird situation, and Cereno is trying to actually do something against him, maybe take his resources or something like that. But he quickly just dismisses this. He's that's ridiculous. It's probably not true. And there's this weird scene where Cereno and Delano are having a conversation, but Babo, the slave servant, starts to shave Cereno with a beard, a beard thing, a razor, and this is kind of symbolic of Babo being in a power position, because he cuts him with a razor. So it's this thing, it looks like he's not doing anything wrong, but he cuts him and it's and Cereno feels threatened that way. So later, when the resources arrive, or when the boat arrives finally, Cereno, the captain, actually tries to escape and jump on the boat, but Babo follows him with a knife and tries to kill him. But so lo and behold, the whole story unravels, and so the San Dominic was actually being run by slaves this whole time. It was just a slave revolt. but the story was pictured this whole time kind of as like to trick the reader, a lot of trickery. So the author Melville, the question is like, did he mean to make the slaves the enemy? We'll get into that later, but anyway, Babbo and the slaves were sentenced to death. Cereno ends up surviving, but they were sentenced to death. They were killed, and a few weeks later, the Captain Cereno also dies, but he doesn't die so he dies because supposedly he was unable to put this situation behind him. He like feels like he finally realizes that, hey, like these people, like we pushed them to the brink of this violence. They had to do this to protect themselves, and like look where it got them. Now they're dead and I'm still alive. Like so it's just a tale of the times. But so that's the summary. All right, so now let's go over some symbols and concepts that I picked up on that are kind of like a big part of this book and why it's so important and significant. Technically it's a short story, but I don't know, I'm calling it a book because whatever. But so we mentioned the knot earlier, and this is actually, I kind of had to branch out for this because it's a little confusing. It doesn't really make much sense to why he just randomly throw a knot to the captain that he doesn't even know. But if you think of it metaphorically, like in the past, you think of slaves and you think of a knot, you think of tying them up, literally and technically physically too. They used to tie them up, and obviously just terrible things that we don't even want to get into. But so metaphorically, you're thinking, yeah, like slaves, I guess intervening and throwing it off, that could mean something. But really, what I think is that knot is symbolic of everybody on the ship being tied up metaphorically in the situation that they're in. You have Delano coming on the ship. He has no idea what's going on. He's caught up in all these suspicions, and he's just weirded out. And then you have Cereno, who is under, assault of what used to be his slaves, and you have obviously the slaves who are fighting for their freedom, who have to kill and who have to monger to get their liberation. So I feel like everyone on the ship is all in this situation. So I think the knot stands for that. Obviously, there's racism, which is Melville, the author, and like he's putting Delano in a position automatically right when he walks in. He's thinking of racial hierarchies. Like why is that slave hitting that person like that? Why is that slave? You know what I mean?
Rebelling.
Yeah. And it's funny how slaves weren't considered as intelligent as white people, but it was Babbo who technically outsmarted. He's the one who tricked all of them. He tricked everyone on the ship, other than obviously the other slaves. But he made Cereno do what he wanted. He was their puppet. So, I mean, so that was pretty interesting. And then another thing which I think is a really key point to this is, like Babbo and the slaves, they're painted as the enemy. As I'm telling you the story, you think that they're the antagonists, the bad people. But what were they doing? They were fighting for. They were just trying to get their freedom back. That's all they were doing. If you put it in a different perspective, it's like, yeah, they killed people, they did this, they did that, but at the end of the day, they were slaves, and they wanted to be free, so they did what was necessary. It's like violence was their only choice. I mentioned it in my other thought of the thoughts, but it's like violence was their only choice, so you can't really blame them. They had to do what they had to do. So I feel like if you could retell this story, like Babbo could actually be viewed as a hero in today's. It's like he took up all of his slaves, and he questioned the norm. He broke the barrier. So, and then my last symbol that I was speaking about was ignorance and trust, which is what we'll get into later with the key questions. But ignorance is bliss here. Like I was telling you about earlier, but if Delano, all these suspicions that he saw, if he like spoke up about anything to the slaves, he would have been dead.
Yeah.
He would have been killed. It's like you can't like, and I don't know if he meant to do that. He just dismissed them. I think he's actually he's kind of oblivious and kind of dumb. He's a dumb character, but like I don't know. It just saved him. It's like the world was working with him. The universe is working with him, and I think that kind of goes with the racism thing. Like he's a white guy, so society works with him. no matter what this guy does, he'll survive. He was just dumb. He saw these obvious hints, but he did nothing about it. He didn't speak up, and that ultimately saved his life, which I think is really interesting. So, okay, so for the final section, we're going to talk about key questions and larger meanings as a whole, because this, at the end of the day, this is just a short story, but the reason it's been so popular for so long is because of the deeper kind of connotations and meanings that have come with it over the hundreds of years. And so we're going to talk about that. The first thing I kind of want to talk about is that trust that we were talking about earlier. Do you, like, when you meet someone right away, the first time you meet them, no matter if you meet them in the street or your friend recommends you to them, whatever, do you trust them, or are you like skeptical of them? You're like,
I feel like
I'm gonna wait.
When it's the first time you're meeting someone, you shouldn't give all your trust. Obviously, it depends on your past experiences. If you were hurt by something like that and you like put yourself so forward, but I feel like at the end of the day, we should be skeptical when we meet people for the first time, because then.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, you shouldn't. I agree with you. I know some people think differently. Some people think you should trust everyone. Like, these are
it's
insane.
Better to not get hurt if you not get hurt internally, mentally, or physically, obviously. But it's better to like see, not get affected rather than Yeah.
So, do you think it's better to trust someone until you break the trust, or someone has to earn your trust?
I feel like earning trust.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially back then, you never really know at all.
Some people don't think that.
And especially
it also has to do with the past. Like,
when you walked in, he didn't know. So like, I mean, obviously there was many signs of weirdness and like unusual stuff. So I feel like he definitely had to show.
Yeah, I think although he was a little bit too trustworthy. I think if he were like us and he weren't really trustworthy, he was more skeptical of people, he probably would have either just left the ship, or he wouldn't have left the ship and he actually would have been dead or killed, because he would have been like, what, like, what are you going, I don't believe you right now, like, all this stuff. So, yeah, I agree. I think you should be skeptical of people until they prove to you, because, I don't know, especially today, people are weird, but... And then there's a more important second question that I think truly, like, encapsulates this whole short story, and it's really the reason, again, why it's been stretched out over so many years, why it's been so important, so significant, and a staple of race. So did Melville, the author Melville, did he intend to poke fun at his society at the time, or is he actually a racist person? That's the question that critics have failed to really uncover, and it's frankly a hard question for us to answer right now, but I think it's important to at least talk about it and question what people say and what people think. Me personally, I think overall, I think he really is trying to, on the very surface of this short story, the theme seems very, very racist. It seems just inherently racist, of course. You have slave revolters who are fighting for their freedom and liberation, yet they're painted and portrayed as enemies and the bad guys. We'll get in later, but I think deep down, maybe Melville's trying to communicate that, hey, like, if you're smart enough to notice, Babbo actually executed a slave revolt, like, on top of all these slave masters and sailors and captains. He outsmarted all of them. He tricked Delano. He pretty much puppeted Cereno. And he got all of the slaves to be in a pretty good position to win freedom. And unfortunately, Delano kind of butted into that for them. But overall, I think Melville, deep down, I think this story has more meaning than just what's on the surface. But what do you think?
I feel like for me, hearing this summary for the first time, and like you said, it's definitely a hard question to think of, but I feel like there's good opinions and like facts for both sides, if he's racist or not, the author. But I feel like I'm kind of leaning towards the side of that he is, even though he might have not portrayed it to be, but it just came off that way from what I've been hearing. Because he definitely portrayed the slaves and the slave revolt people to be bad guys, like you said, and not good. And then he portrayed also the white people to be the good people, even though back then it would be reversed. We would think of the slaves to be that we feel bad for them, and that like it sucks that they're in that position. The white people to be bad people, so that's just.
No, I definitely agree, and that's what I was saying. I think like at first glance, this short story is definitely like you're like this doesn't make any sense, like, and you don't really notice at first. Like my first time reading through it, well, I only read through it once, but my first time glancing at it and just understanding it, I was like I didn't really pick up on what I was just inevitably doing just based on how it was structured. Like, for example, you read it and you like just think that the slaves are the bad guys just because of how Melville writes it. But then you come to a realization, you're like, this is just doesn't make any sense. Like, it's just wrong. It's just wrong that they're the bad guys. It does not right. Like,
reverse.
It doesn't matter that they killed people, because at the end of the day, like, it's a whole group of people. It's a whole race that have been oppressed and enslaved, and so I agree. I think on the surface it's very racist, but I think Melville gives little hints that in fact kind of show the reader that maybe he isn't a racist writer, and that maybe he did try to mock or poke fun at his society at the time. So I don't know, it's an interesting question, and we don't really have the answer to it. We just try to speculate. So we'll see if anyone ever can figure it out. But for now, thank you. That's it for this conversation. Thank you.